Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Chris. I'm part of the team here at Quadrotech, and I'm joined by our Director of Enterprise Migrations, Mike Weaver. I'll hand over to Mike in a moment, but before we get started, just want to let you know that everyone will be muted throughout today's webinar, but you can ask questions at any point by typing them into the question box, and we'll run through them at the end. We'll also be sending a link to the slide deck and recording to everyone tomorrow, so you can refer back to it at any time. But with that, Mike, remote work and problems with PST files. Please tell us all about it.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. And thanks everyone for joining us today. So this will be a quick 20-minute direct session. And as Chris said, please ask questions as we go, and we'll try to capture those probably over the 20-minute mark at the end. Where we only have 20 minutes, I'm not going to do a full company overview. We really want to dive in here just to list our products. So if you need anything that we can help with, certainly check out our website. Archive Shuttle is our archive migration product, which is Enterprise Vault and EMC Source 1 into Office 365. PST Flight Deck we'll touch briefly on just in concept today. Cloud Commander is our tenant-to-tenant migration solution for merger, acquisition, and divestitures. And finally, Nova, which is our reporting, security analytics, and delegated administration product for Office 365. If any of those are of interest to you, please check out our website or get in touch with us after. But let's talk about PST files, and why don't we're going to review some of the big problems and where there's real change of remote working has made these issues even worse, and kind of some options and how to do the migration here. So when we remember, these files are not portable and they can be quite large, and this has been a problem for years, and a lot of organizations have been able to successfully migrate them into Office 365 or on-prem Exchange, wherever it may be. But the lack of portability continues to be a larger and larger problem as we have more working conditions. We also have issues where they get corrupt as they get larger, as we open them over a network, which is technically not supported, but certainly common practice. They get more corrupt. This is also true the newer the version of Outlook you have, the chattier they've gotten with PSTs, and this increases the risk of corruption to these files. They don't work well in virtual environments, so they have to be open up over the network. If you're doing full virtual machines, then you've got to, some users will try to download them into the machine, which just bloats that infrastructure, and that can be quite a challenge. And at the end of the day, these files have critical data and confidential data in them. We've all seen some of the scandals around these PSTs getting into the wrong hands, and this data is still very critical. So even if it's lost and corrupt, for some of our employees, we've been using these for a very long time. There's lots of very critical company information in them as well. The bottom line is that the files really prevent users from working remotely effectively, which obviously is quite a challenge here. And most firms can't ignore the productivity issues and the risk associated with it. When we talk about the two kinds of PSTs, we have local PSTs and network PSTs. Centralizing local PSTs that are now on our laptops and desktops that have even walked out the door and home, migrating these back to a central manner is quite a problem. Our VPN systems are really at or exceeding capacity, and migrating large chunks of files in any direction just isn't really a good option. The other challenge we have is these files can be quite a problem from risk perspective. Most of our devices are encrypted now, but there still can be some, in the speed of trying to get everyone home, some things might have been missed. Putting them on external media, so some users might, if that's not blocked, been able to do that, and now that is at risk. Backing up workstations isn't common anymore, particularly with OneDrive and a lot of the files there, but if they're sitting there on the local drive, now they're not being backed up, and that can be a very large problem for this critical data. And then they're also susceptible to ransomware, and without having backups, you can't roll back at any time, and that problem just gets harder. When we talk about network PSTs, we mentioned already that this technically isn't supported when you look at the Microsoft support mechanism for PST files and Outlook, but it's still very common practice. With the VPN connections overburdened, they'll time out, you'll get disconnects, and if you're right in the middle of a file operation at that time, that can really increase the risk of corruption. The users doing a self-migration, so let's say you're on Office 365, they've got the space, that has a lot of issues, and with network PSTs, that means they're trying to drag this down to their workstation to push it right back up. So you're kind of taking a double trip there on the VPN. And the other problem are multiple users sharing PST files. So this we've run into, and certainly I think a lot of people on this call have, and this just doesn't work in the current conditions and really adds to the corruption risk. And this data should be in a shared mailbox. The main item that changed is, I think we're all aware of, the mass amount of people going home, but this really good PwC study really highlights it quite well, where, for most organizations at the height of the COVID pandemic, certainly, there's areas in the world that are still working with us in the height of it in their region, 77% of employees were home. And certainly when you look at the 39% at the top, that's a big increase in change. And we look at projected, I know here at Quadrotech, we're going to be mostly remote for, probably the rest of the year, and a lot of organizations are in that point as well. And so as a result, our endpoints all went home rapidly. So, a lot of organizations told people to take their desktop off their computer, walk out the door, or suddenly they're on their home computer using a Citrix solution or VMware solution, whatever it may be, to control and get in. And our VPN traffic is really, really important for those that have some on-prem items. So a lot of voice over IP systems are on-prem, and that traffic is really important so we can keep that contact with our customers, and we need that traffic to be preserved. And as a result, we just can't push our PST content through those systems. The problem with PST files is these problems have always been here. It's just this has rapidly exposed it, and we just can't ignore it anymore. And we have a lot of clients coming into us right now with this panic because we're all not going back to offices as rapidly as we thought, and we really have to deal with this critical data head on. So let's talk about what we can do. And I'm going to talk about kind of a few options here, some of what we're doing with our software, some you can do in general with some of the free tools that are available. At the end of the day, though, when you're talking about let's say more than 500 users, most organizations of size, they just can't handle this without a piece of automation and tooling. We're not sized to do this manually, and there's certainly a better ways to do it. Whether this tooling is paid tooling or some of the free tooling that's available from Microsoft, those are certain options, and there's payoffs to each, and we'll go into that briefly at the end. The other success factor is ensuring that you know where all the files are and who they belong to. And that means looking at all the endpoints and looking at all the network shares and really understanding your situation. You want to process these files away from really your data center, but not over the VPN. You can't have a solution here where the data has to go through your VPN to be processed. The other thing to keep in mind is what goes up must come down. So even if you put it into the mailbox, unless you're going into the archive mailbox, you might actually just end up the users caching it down. So you've got to be careful with your cache settings as well. We already talked about we want the processing to be off the workstation as much as possible. Actually, we didn't go into that in great detail, but we want to ensure that we're not spiking that workstation. So there are some solutions that push it through Outlook, and you really need to be careful, particularly where people are overburdened right now, that their working hours are really preserved. We don't have full-time workspaces for a lot of our employees. For people that are full-time work at home, they were required to have a desk and a place to work. We have a lot of people that were never set up for remote working. So they're setting up every morning on the kitchen table and doing their work and then putting it away at the end of the day. So that device isn't available off hours for a lot of our moving. So we have to keep that in mind as well, that we don't want to interrupt that user experience. Speaking of user experience, it's critical. We're going to talk about in more detail in the next slide on that. And you really need, and this is where obviously I'm biased in saying this, but you need to have the right combination of people that have done this before, the right tool for the right job. And this includes if the free tools are right for you, but using it correctly in the experience to do it, and then having the right operations team to actually execute it and repeat this over and over again. When we talk about user experience, Right now, our user community is overburdened. You know, a lot of us are dealing with a lot of changes in our home life right now, and even our working life as well. So we really can't add a lot more onto our colleagues' plate. So we need to ensure that whatever we do, the process is known and clear. We want to avoid help desk calls. Help desk calls are probably at an all-time high right now as it is. So we really don't want to add any more to that. We need to ensure that the process is complete. And by this, I mean that we don't just focus on the PSTs on the workstations, but if they have them on the network, we're taking care of those at the same time as well, so that they only have to transition once. The problem you also have to avoid is if you only deal with one and not the other, you're going to kind of be playing whack-a-mole all over the place, trying to, chase the user around, which just isn't a good experience for anybody involved. And we have to ensure that we're not impacting the user's ability to work. Again, the concentration of our colleagues doing work really is concentrated in a few hours. We've got to ensure that people can focus on their work and we're not interrupting them while they're working with the current conditions that we have. To make matters a little more challenging for people that haven't worked remotely, we need this to be really intuitive. The help desk call avoidance of asking your friend in the cube next to you for help, that's not going to be there. You're not going to have that direct involvement from team leads and power users that can kind of help through this. That we know the community that we built and to support our systems. We need it to be really intuitive because we don't have that luxury right now. We really need these risks remediated, particularly where this is, we're not going to see those desktop computers coming in as rapidly as we thought. So, we really want to remediate this problem and ensure that this data is portable. We talk about portability. Right now, this data isn't available on, web access or office.com, and it's not on your mobile devices. It's not visible. Again, this was always an issue, but for our user community that came in, used a desktop, went home every day, it wasn't as big of a problem. But now this problem is very direct and a very large challenge. Noting here, our agent manages user experience, but there can be scripts and other ways that you can mitigate some of these items as well. But again, we want to be sure that our user community is focusing on their work. Another item here is scanning. We want to ensure that your discovery is complete. Microsoft's tool had a really good revision about 18 months ago that helped with some of this. It still doesn't do the ownership piece as well, but you really want to be sure that you're finding everything and remediating this problem. The other problem you're going to have is if you don't fully remediate it, when you go to block these files later, which is really what you're going to want to end with, you may end up turning off users' ability to work because you missed a location, you missed a server, you missed a piece of storage or whatever it may be. For effective scanning, you need to know where the files are, who they belong to, and you also need to be able to address and plan for terminated user PSTs. So you've got to work with legal and everyone else to find what your retention policy is and make plans associated with it. You also need to deal with duplicate PSTs with the current times and again, the VPN problems and resources being really scarce. You want to plan to address these duplicate PSTs and backup PSTs, which I don't have on the slide here, having an effective plan for those where you may not process them or look at factors so that you can figure out that that really is a duplicate file. I don't need to process it from the workstation and the network. We can just delete the duplicate. Knowing all this really allows you to plan your project and execute it. And planning is a huge part of this, is understanding where they are. It allows you to make an enablement plan that doesn't overtax any systems and doesn't overtax any of your users or departments. So really striping this across is quite important. Another aspect is Microsoft, again, has done some really good enhancements and some really good articles on this for split tunneling your traffic. So allowing your workstations to go directly, if you're on Office 365, to Office 365. But when we're talking about centralizing this data, you also want to find a way to split tunnel the traffic off of your VPN as well. So ensuring that this is protected. And I've specifically called out VoIP traffic here because that is a very large concern, particularly for customers that are not using, Microsoft's VoIP solutions, but using, an on-prem solution. This is really quite important to ensure it's handled correctly. We talk about migration options, local PSTs on the workstations. What we are seeing either through our solution or otherwise is getting these files uploaded through an alternate method, obviously in a secure manner. So we talked about split tunneling, getting them into an Azure box for migration is a really good method to avoid the VPN as long as you have split tunneling set up, and or using even your DMZ. So using a secure method to upload the files directly into your DMZ and getting that complete. We've seen some of our clients here have done that with really good effectiveness to offload that data, and that's really been quite successful. You want to ensure that the user keeps read-only access to these files while they're being migrated. Not all solutions have that, and it is important because it's going to take longer for these files to migrate. Some of our users have been using these files back to the 90s, so the addiction to this data and is really quite strong. So you need to ensure that they keep this access and you're not taking them away from them for a week at a time or 2 weeks at a time, because that can really be impactful. You also need to ensure that your solution handles interrupted uploads and it just restarts again where it left off, so that you can handle those VPN disconnects that are quite inevitable right now. For network PSTs, you want to ensure again that the ownership is known and migrate them at the same time. When you enable a user, you want to ensure that you're migrating that user at the same time, both the network PSTs and the local PSTs. Again, this prevents the user from trying to go around the migration process and just gets that entire issue remediated so that they can move forward in their new working environment. And your network PSTs, you want to be sure that you're dealing with them centrally as well. So you don't want them user-driven where they're trying to download these from the network over the VPN down to the workstation, up to Office, back down to the workstation and the cache. So you've really got to kind of go back to networking basics here and be sure that you're using a solution that can be effective. Here at Quadrotech, we handle a lot of these, the scanning process and locating these across both, and giving that flexibility of processing files where they need to be. So all those options that we mentioned are supported by us. The also cleaning and ensuring that these files have the passwords removed and fixing corruption to industry standards. We have tons of other options that are listed here on the screen to help you do that. If you're not quite sure what you want to do, if you want to go to a tool or use some of the free tooling, we have written a really nice ebook with several independent Microsoft MVPs. This is a really good guide. Chris, I know we're going to include this in the post materials, but it walks you through using the free tools and some of the advantages of the paid tools and helps you make this decision. If you're a Kindle person, you can actually download this on Amazon, although there is a service fee for doing it on Amazon instead of it just doing it free through the website. But that is the main thing. So I'm keeping within my 20-minute topic here. If you do have questions, please feel free to add them to the questions bar in the right-hand side. We are going to do a more in-depth webinar on Thursday, August 20th, really focusing on how we do migrate these. So we're going to be applying some of the items from the ebook here and showing in great detail. So this is kind of our tickler session for the problem that we have here. So with that, we'll hop into Q&A. Give a few minutes to see if we get any questions here.
Nothing showing up in the Q&A as yet. It's a very quick yet comprehensive session, Mike. I guess maybe you want to give a closing statement, just going over some of the recent questions that you've had.
Yeah, absolutely. So the main thing to keep in mind is, you heard me talk a lot about the VPN. Ensuring you can split tunnel your traffic is really going to be quite successful. So if you're someone, working with your network team for any data project, even beyond PST files right now, if you're trying to get files off the workstation and into OneDrive so that you don't have to back up the workstation, or whatever you're trying to remediate, really looking at the split tunneling features of your VPN software, but also applying some of the Microsoft best practices really is the way to go to increase user experience and also support the file migrations. All right, well, that is all. If you have questions after, feel free to use the Contact Us feature out on our website. And I think that is all. Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Bye-bye.